Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this Memorial Day weekend. Uh, General George Patton once said, "It's wrong to mourn the death of these men. Rather, we should celebrate that they lived." And, I put that quote up, and a very wise Catholic follower of me always has great comments. So, well, don't forget, Jesus wept, Rob. And he's right. There's a time for weeping and mourning. But this weekend, us Americans choose to celebrate with family and friends that we love and celebrate the sacrifices of all the men and women who died securing us freedom. So if you follow me, normally I go to our veteran cemetery and celebrate in a Memorial Day ceremony with my good friend Bernardo from realestateforlife.org. So I'm going to try and make this video quick and get over there. And then afterwards, I always like to keep a tradition alive that Rush Limbaugh started many years ago and tell a great patriotic story, one in particular, and then I usually add a couple more. So Lord willing, I'll have that video up later today. But today I really felt that I needed to clarify a few things because people are misunderstanding me. Some people, if you watch me, you know what a lot of people say about me. Ask Rob the time and he'll build you a clock. Sometimes I just feel the need to cover every detail before I get to the story so you fully understand the story, or I cover every detail to let you be as most informed about a subject as possible. And to some people, it's just like, okay, you're saying the same thing over and over again. And, my great priest, Father Fidel, who we've spoken about here recently, he has a similar temperament of mine, and I notice he does the same thing as me. But another great priest, Father Derek, our pastor, he usually gets right to the point, and he always tries to help me out. Say, Rob, you got to keep your videos a little shorter and get to the point. So I try and emulate both of these great priests. And my favorite YouTuber, my favorite apologist YouTuber, who I think is the best apologist on YouTube, who I had on this show on Blue Collar and a Scholar, Dr. Doug Beaumont, I like listening to him because he gets straight to the point. And he picks the best argument for his point. Somehow, every time, he has the best argument defending the Catholic faith, and he gets right to the point. So sometimes I try and do that, and then people misunderstand me. So I'm just gonna be who I am and try to explain what I'm trying to explain the best that I can. So recently, I was talking about dissenters and how some dissenters of the church use the traditional Latin mass as a weapon to divide us. Now, talking about blue collars and the scholars, if you're not familiar with that, I invite Catholic scholars on. I've somehow, by the grace of God, I've had Dr. Scott Hahn. I had the former president of the Evangelical Theological Society, so the scholar of scholars in evangelicalism, who converted to Catholicism while he was the president of the Evangelical Theological Society, Dr. Francis J. Beckwith. I've had him on. I've had Dr. Richard Gallagher. I've had just Dr. Beaumont, who I mentioned. I've had a lot of great scholars. Dr. Alan Keyes, former presidential candidate. And to me, I was struck by their humility. Like, why would they come on my show? These are like really, scholarly guys, really smart guys, really in demand. And, come on, some of them came on my show when I had like 6,000 subscribers. I'm still tiny YouTube compared to most Catholic YouTubers. And for some reason, they say yes, So to me, it's a sign of humility. These guys are so humble. But the guy I found the most humble was Dr. Robert P. George. Dr. Robert P. George is a legal scholar, a political scholar, a historical scholar. When he came on, we talked about politics. We talked about Roe v. Wade's legal issues. This was before it was dropped, and he correctly predicted, that it would be overturned. He said a lot of really smart things. But the one thing that stuck with me the most was when I asked him, how does he stay such good friends with Dr. Cornel West, who's polar opposites in his views on politics. Dr. Robert P. George is a very well-known conservative writer, conservative thinker, conservative philosopher, conservative scholar. You can say all these things about Dr. Cornel West, but replace the word conservative for liberal. But yet they're really good friends. And Dr. Cornel West has given me a commitment that he would come on the show. So Lord willing, we'll have him on, and you'll see what I'm talking about here. But Dr. Robert P. George's answer was, when I said, how could you be such good friends with this guy? He said, well, because we both know when we come to a table to debate that I could be wrong, you know? And that's what this country has gotten away from, is where two people disagree, having that humility, knowing I could be wrong, that I'm actually going to listen to see. I think I'm right. This is why I'm stating my position, but I could be wrong. I'm not God. So let me listen. You know, God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth, so I should listen twice as much as I speak. Let me listen to my opponent. And St. Thomas Aquinas teaches this. Learn your opponent's best argument. Learn your opponent's best argument. Don't attack his weakest argument, because then they're like, yeah. But if you know his best argument and you can prove that to be wrong, then you get people's attention. So I could be wrong. Okay? But this is what I believe. The traditional Latin Mass is a holy and beautiful and valid and licit. Licit meaning legal according to canon law. Illicit meaning illegal according to canon law. The traditional Latin Mass is all of that. And the only reason I haven't been to one is because when I came back to the Catholic Church, there was none of them close enough for me to visit. But I've watched them on YouTube, and I see the beauty. I see the holiness. I see the attraction, you know. But my only argument is with those who say that's the only Mass we should go to. And I know most of my viewers that go to it don't say that. So I assume they know I'm not talking about them. But then, you get new people and they misunderstand what you're saying. So I just wanted to say that, in addition to the traditional Latin Mass, there's 23 Eastern Catholic rites that are also holy, beautiful, valid, and licit. But the ordinary Mass, the one that the Church says should be the first we choose, the ordinary, unless you're an Eastern Rite Catholic, is the Novus Ordo Mass. That's the ordinary Mass. Now, you can go to a traditional Latin Mass if that's your preference. But the problem I have is with those that call the Novus Ordo Mass intrinsically evil. And you have men on YouTube, popular guys like Kennedy Hall, that says outright the Novus Ordo Mass is intrinsically evil. And he stated, I would rather die than participate in a Novus Ordo Mass. Because he's a member of this group called the SSPX. Now, there's been groups like this throughout history. Men led by men who think they know better than the Church, they know better than the Pope, that the Church is wrong. Early on you had Donatus. He started the false teaching of Donatism, Arianism. Then you had a guy named Ignaz von Dollinger, who, when we had Vatican I in the 1800s, he said that council was an error, and he started the Old Catholics. And it's funny about Dollinger, he also said the Church there were modernists, because they were saying the Mass in Latin, and in the first 4 centuries, we know the Mass was said in the vernacular, the language of the people, usually Greek, Hebrew, or Aramaic. So he was already, before Vatican I, he was already in schism, rejected the Pope and the magisterium giving the Mass in the vernacular. But it wasn't until he outright came out and rejected Vatican I that he was excommunicated. And then you had, in like the 1980s, Marcel Lefebvre, after he signed, he was at Vatican II and he signed it like it was all cool, but then afterwards he rejected it and he called Pope St. John Paul II an Antichrist. And Marcel Lefebvre died an excommunicated Catholic. Pope John Paul II died a saint. Ignatius of von Dollinger, the guy who started the Old Catholics, he died an excommunicated Catholic. Arius died an excommunicated Catholic. Donatus died an excommunicated Catholic. So throughout the church's history, you always had these small groups that, claimed they were the remnant, they were the true church. The biggest of them all was excommunicated Catholic Martin Luther, who started the Protestant Reformation. They knew better than the church. The church has gotten modern. They wanted to go back to tradition. That's what Protestant reformers claim. The church became too modern. They added stuff. They wanted to go back to tradition of the first century. Of course, all these people are wrong. And like I said, I could be wrong. But Jesus said to Peter, "You're the rock, and on this church I will build, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail." I could be wrong, but Jesus can't be wrong. And St. Paul tells Timothy, 1 Timothy 3:15, the church is the pillar and foundation of truth. I could be wrong, but the church can't be wrong on matters of faith and morals. And the church has said the Novus Ordo Mass is the ordinary Mass. It's a valid Mass. It's good. They've also said the traditional Latin Mass is a good Mass. It's valid. It's licit. They also said the 23 Eastern Rite Masses are. But one Mass, they say, is illicit, meaning it's not canonical, it's not legal. And that's the SSPX Mass. It's not licit. If you have nowhere else to go, you can go there because these priests have been validly ordained, or they're all priests. They have apostolic succession. So the Eucharist is valid. So their Mass is valid, but it's illicit. It's illegal because they're in schism with the church. And they say, well, no, we're not in schism. But the 4 popes since they've been around have all said they're in schism. So who are you going to believe? Even Pope Francis went above and beyond and recently gave faculties to their priests to have people be married, and hear confession. So up until Pope Francis, all their marriages are invalid. Think about that. All their confessions are invalid. Think about that. And yet they still, the vast majority of Kennedy Hall, still lie about Pope Francis, take his words and twist them and say he's the worst pope in the history of popes. But the bishops thanked Pope Francis for giving their faculties back because they knew they didn't have them. Just think about that. But they have a lot of money, just like the Mormon cult has a lot of money. The SSPX has a lot of money, and they have a lot of influential people. In fact, Timothy Gordon, who hates the Pope as much as Kennedy Hall and Taylor Marshall, was on my show live, and someone asked him why him and Taylor doing TNT together. And Tim Gordon, you could check out the live version, the first one I did with him. He's like, I don't know. He just cut me off. He said, my daughter was going into, I just lost my job, because what he said about the BLM, which was true. He said, my daughter was going in for brain surgery. It was chances she might not have came out alive. I called him to ask for prayer, and I realized he blocked my number. He blocked me on all social media, and he wouldn't let me back on the show. And he never told me why. Till this day, he never told him why. It's just like cold business, And the business he is promoting the SSPX. Apparently, Timothy Gordon said the only thing that changed was we got in a little disagreement on Twitter when I said the truth. Again, he got fired from, I disagree with Timothy Gordon on the Pope, but he got fired as a teacher because he said the truth about BLM, and he got fired from TNT because he said the truth about SSPX. He said they're not canonical, they're illicit, they're in schism. This is the truth. Even Cardinal Burke has said this. I mean, everybody knows this except the SSPX and those people that are being financed, like Taylor Marshall, who promotes the SSPX. And so if I get angry that people leading people astray in the Catholic Church. I was a Protestant for 30 years, and the thing that kept me from being Catholic is I knew I had to submit to the authority of the church, the Pope and his magisterium. I knew in matters of faith and morals that I had to believe that they're infallible. And I see so many Catholics just dissenting from the teachings of the Pope and the magisterium. Like they know better than the Pope and the magisterium, just like Arius, Donatus, Lefebvre, Ignaz, all these they rather follow excommunicated Catholics than the Pope and the magisterium. So that's my beef. And the beef isn't with the TLM. My beef was with those that use it to cause division. Because another thing that brought me back to the Catholic Church was my realization that Jesus started one church. He said, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." Not many churches, my church. Jesus once created one church. And he says, "Father, I pray they become one as we are one." His last prayer before he died, he prayed for unity. So, I started this channel to bring Protestants back home to the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. But then I get in debates and comments from people that in the beginning I always thought were Protestant. Honestly, thought I'm debating a Protestant. So I'm Catholic. And then I realized they're Catholic dissenters from the SSPX, or those that are being influenced by Catholic dissenters from the SSPX. And they're giving me Protestant arguments without even realizing it. So, again, I could be wrong. But if you're a Catholic, you have to realize the church can't be wrong in matters of faith and morals. And the church says the Novus Ordo Mass is the ordinary Mass we should go to. It's licit and it's valid. They say the SSPX Mass is valid but illicit. Excommunicated Catholic Marcel Lefebvre and his followers like Kennedy Hall publicly stated that the Novus Order is intrinsically evil and you should stay home and not go to Mass if that's the only Mass you can get to. That's against the church. That's my beef, is people that dissent from the church. And they come off pious, they come off nice, they come off kind, they come off godly. But St. Paul warned about these people. He told Timothy, in the last days, there will be men with a form of godliness, but they will deny its power. They deny the power of the Holy Spirit protecting the church, like Jesus said when he said the gates of hell will not prevail. They reject the power of the Holy Spirit. Like St. Paul said, the church is the pillar of truth. No, they follow men, excommunicated men, who say the church is in error. So that's my beef. That's it. I've had Keith Nestor on here. He told me he fell in love with the Latin Mass. He would never say the Novus Ordo was intrinsically evil. I had Dr. Scott Hahn on this show. We didn't talk about the Latin Mass when he was on it, but I know he loves it. I've heard him say how beautiful it is, but he would never say the Novus Ordo. In fact, Scott Hahn and Keith Nestor came over and was amazed by the Novus Ordo Mass. Same thing with me. When we all went to Novus Ordo Mass, we were all Bible-believing Christians. I mean, Scott Hahn was a scholar, and Keith Nestor was a pastor in Protestantism. I was just a layman, but I knew my Bible very well. And we all heard the same thing. Wow, we hear more Bible in this Mass than any Protestant church I've been to. I mean, the priest is speaking the Bible, praying the Bible. We're singing the Bible. We're hearing the Bible read. It's all biblical. And then, what we're doing is replicating the Supper of the Lamb in Revelation. It was so clear and so bright and so brilliant that we fell in love with the Catholic Mass. This was a Novus Ordo Mass that all of us came to. And there's many reverts that came and they love the Latin Mass now, but it was the Novus Ordo. And that was what the Holy Spirit told the Church of Vatican II. We need to have a new evangelization. The old evangelization was bringing in pagans that never heard the gospel. The new evangelization is bringing in baptized Christians who left the Catholic Church. And they're bringing us in by the armies of us, So of course the devil hates the new Mass. Of course the devil hates Vatican II, And, when I was coming back to the church, after I went to the Mass, I was like, wow, this is so biblical. Is this how they did it early on? So I looked up the earliest description of the Mass I can find. It was from 150 AD, and Justin Martyr describes the Mass. And I was like, wow, this is the Mass I just went to. This Novus Ordo Mass I just went to, I didn't know there was other different Catholic Mass. I just knew. I didn't say, I said, wow, this was the Catholic Mass I just went to. It's almost identical. And that's what the church did in Vatican II. They went back to tradition, not back to 1962. They went back to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century when the Mass was said in the vernacular of the people. And actually, if you read it, they said they can say the Mass in the vernacular, but they must say some Latin. So every Novus Order, we have Latin in it, and we're allowed to say it in our vernacular, you know. And then if you look through history, there's no denying the first 1,000 years, communion in the hand was normal. Now the church allows for either. It allows for either. So when I came back to the church, before I knew all this, and my priest explained that you can receive communion in the hand or on the tongue, and if you can receive it on the hand, this is how you have to receive it. If you receive it on the tongue, this is how you have to receive it. And I said, well, how did the 1st century church do it? And he said, in the hand. Because I wanted to go back. When Protestants come back to Catholicism, they want to go back. They're tired of this modern evangelical stuff. They want to go back to the way the apostles, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century did it. And the Novus Ordo reflects that more. It's not saying the TLM is bad. There's some things that the church learns and gets better at. So maybe there's parts of the TLM that's better than the Novus Ordo. But you can't say the Novus Ordo is modernist unless you call the TLM modernist, because there's been a lot of changes in the TLM. 1962 Mass wasn't the first time they said Mass in Latin. They've some developments is the word. Things develop. So I'm not saying either one is better. I'm just saying the new Mass has brought a lot of on fire Christians back into the Catholic Church. So my prayer is that we would be one. And when I sound angry at those that are causing division is because I get emails of people that left the church, that have binge watched these guys and have left the church. Catholic for Redneck said he was about to leave the church. He was on the ledge about to leave the church after binge watching Taylor Marshall for days and weeks on end. I get letters like that all the time, emails like that all the time. Our job we're all called to be evangelists and bring people back into the church that Jesus Christ started, to bring them to Jesus, to bring them to the Eucharist so they too can receive the body and blood of Jesus Christ. There's nowhere else they can go for that. So I hope that clarifies. People said, I bashed the TLM, I dumped the TLM. God forbid, and God help me if I sounded that way, and please forgive me if I sounded that way. That is not my intention, and it never was. But again, I'm going to go spend time with our heroes at the Veteran Cemetery, and it's always great. You see like these old guys. One time I met an old chief, Navy chief. He was like 95, and he served in World War II. I left my phone in my car. This time I'm going to see if I bring my car and my phone, maybe I get some good pics. So if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And also, I'm going to meet my buddy from realestateforlife.org. On fire Catholic, strong pro-life guy. So if you're buying or selling real estate, please go to realestateforlife.org and support a pro-life real estate company. God bless. Until next time, stay Catholic.